So, here's where it all began, or at least how I remember it. 5 years into our marriage, I honestly thought we were doing okay. Just the usual work dinners, a few vacations here and there. I'm Ryan, a 35-year-old marketing manager, and I guess I'm about as average as they come. I'm no ladies' man, and I didn't expect every single day to feel like some grand adventure. But Emily, my wife, well, she started to see things differently. She's 33, a graphic designer with a real passion for art and fashion, always chasing that next big thing to make her feel alive. I just didn't realize back then that she wasn't just looking for excitement. She was looking for something much bigger. Our 5th anniversary was supposed to be special, at least I thought it would be. I put a lot of effort into planning it, dinner at this fancy place. The kind where soft piano music plays in the background, and they charge you 3 times as much for a steak just because it's got a few herbs sprinkled on top. I even made this slideshow, a montage of our memories over the years. Our trips, the holidays spent with family, all the goofy moments in our first apartment. Thought it would be a nice touch, something sentimental. But as the pictures flashed on the screen, Emily just sat there, staring blankly at her wine glass. At first, I thought maybe she was just tired or stressed out from work. But then I noticed how she kept glancing around, watching other couples laughing, having a good time, being more spontaneous than we were. She looked disappointed, like she felt like she was missing out. We barely spoke during dinner. I tried to make small talk, maybe reminisce about our wedding day, but she just nodded absent-mindedly, pushing her food around her plate. I tried to brush it off, thinking maybe she'd warm up later, but there was this feeling in my gut that I couldn't shake, like something wasn't right. I convinced myself it was just my own paranoia, but looking back, I should have listened to that feeling. Because that night, when we got home, it all came crashing down. I'm not even sure how it started. We were just lying in bed, and I mentioned something about us taking a weekend trip, just the two of us. She sighed, but not a tired, content sigh. No, this was one of those deep, frustrated sighs, like she'd been holding something in for a long time. Then she turned on the lamp, sat up, and just unloaded. "Ryan," she said, "I can't keep pretending like everything's fine." "What do you mean?" I asked, trying to sit up too, but feeling like the weight of it all was keeping me stuck in the bed. "I'm talking about us. Our marriage," she said, and that's when my stomach sank. I feel like we're stuck, like I'm missing out on something, like I'm not living. "Missing out?" I repeated, genuinely confused. "What do you mean? We got a good life. We're comfortable, we're secure." She didn't let me finish. "We're bored, Ryan. We're boring. All we do is work, come home, watch TV, go to bed, and start all over again. I need something more. I need excitement. I need to feel alive." I was in shock. We weren't kids anymore, but we weren't dead either. We had a stable, decent life. But that wasn't enough for her. And then she said it, the one thing I'll never forget. "Maybe we should try seeing other people." I felt like she slapped me across the face. Was she serious? We'd been married for 5 years, and now, out of nowhere, she wanted to just throw it all away because she was bored? I was so angry, hurt, confused. My mind was racing. "What, so that's it?" I snapped. "You want to go off with other people because our life isn't exciting enough for you? You think that's going to fix things?" "It's not about that, Ryan," she said, trying to sound calm, but I could hear the tremor in her voice. "It's about feeling connected, about feeling something new. You just don't get it." "You're damn right I don't get it," I said, my voice rising. "If you want a connection, why not work on what we have instead of running off to someone else the second things get hard?" She just shook her head. "I don't know if we can fix this, Ryan. I don't even know if I want to." Those words, they hit like a knife to the chest. We sat there in silence, both staring at the wall, feeling more distant than ever. It was like we were in the same room, but living in different worlds. And that's when I realized we were sharing a house, but we were living completely different lives. The next few days were a blur. I felt like a zombie. I couldn't focus at work. I couldn't talk to my friends without feeling like I was lying to them. I didn't know how to make sense of any of it. So I started writing. Every night, I'd grab a notebook and pour everything out. My anger, my confusion, my desperation to hold on to what we had. It was stupid, but writing in that journal felt like the only thing that kept me from completely losing it. We tried to make things work, at least at first. Emily suggested we go out to dinner at our favorite place, a small Italian spot with red checkered tablecloths and the best lasagna you could imagine. I thought it might be a good chance to talk, maybe reconnect, but it didn't go like that. All we did was talk in circles. I'd try asking her about her day, ease into a conversation, but it always ended up the same. She'd bring up her dreams, all the things she wanted to do, places she wanted to go, how she wanted to experience more of life. But when I talked, it was always about work. I didn't even realize it at the time, but I was just rambling on about deadlines and projects, the stress that came with it all. I thought I was sharing my life with her, but to her, it was just background noise. She tried to smile, to listen, but I could see it. She was somewhere else, somewhere I couldn't reach. And just like that, dinner would end. We'd go home, sleep in the same bed, but it felt like there was an invisible wall between us. Looking back, I really should have picked up on the signs a lot sooner. But you know how it is. Sometimes you don't see things for what they are until it's too late to do anything about it. After that nightmare of an anniversary, you'd think we'd at least try to figure things out, right? Well, it turns out that was just wishful thinking. Everything only got worse, and before I knew it, I was watching it all spiral out of control. It felt like Emily had switched gears entirely, and I was left scrambling to keep up. She started spending more and more time with Megan, her best friend, who was this carefree, free-spirited type. I never had a problem with Megan before, but the more time Emily spent with her, the more I felt like we were drifting farther apart. Out of nowhere, Emily had a million things to do, places to be, none of which ever included me. Cafes I'd never even heard of, bars I'd never been to, and who knows what was going on at those yoga classes they'd started taking together. It was like she was discovering this entire new world without me, and I wasn't even on the guest list. I'd come home from work, completely wiped out, hoping for a quiet dinner and maybe a movie like we used to do, but she'd either be out at some trendy spot or hunched over her phone, texting God knows who. If I walked into a room, she'd lock her phone or flip it face down, pretending like everything was just normal. Yeah, sure. I tried to bring it up with her. Asked her to talk about us, about where we were heading. One night, I asked if we could just sit down, share a meal, and catch up. She suggested this hipster sushi joint, the kind of place that felt more like an art exhibit than a restaurant. I wasn't at all comfortable there, but I went along with it. The second we sat down, the tension was thick enough to cut through. She wasted no time getting to the point. As soon as the waiter left, she launched into this whole discussion about rules and boundaries. I knew, deep down, what was coming, but that didn't make it any easier to hear. Ryan, we need to have a serious talk about the way we're living our lives, she started. I nodded, already mentally exhausted from whatever mess she was about to throw my way. I think we need to make some changes, she said. Maybe establish some new boundaries. New boundaries? I echoed, already feeling a pit in my stomach. What are you talking about, Emily? She leaned in, as if she was about to reveal some big secret. Look, I know you're not too crazy about the idea of seeing other people, but what if we tried it? Just casual dates. No strings attached. Nothing serious. Just dinners or drinks with other people. I sat there, completely stunned, trying to process what she was saying. Open dates? Casual dinners? You're telling me that's a solution? So, let me get this straight, I said, struggling to keep my voice steady. You want us to go out with other people. And what? Pretend we're not even married. It's not like that, Ryan, she snapped, clearly frustrated. It's about experiencing something new, about seeing what's out there, feeling alive again. Feeling alive? I couldn't hold it in anymore. Are you seriously telling me that going on dates with strangers is going to fix whatever is wrong with us? That's not going to solve anything, Emily. That's just you running away from what's in front of you. She stood up abruptly, knocking her chair back, and I felt the eyes of every other person in the restaurant on us. I don't know if I want to work on this anymore, Ryan, she said, her voice cracking. Maybe I don't want to be married to you. With that, she stormed off, leaving me sitting there in shock. The sushi sat untouched in front of me, and all I could think was, how did we get here? This wasn't the woman I married. Or maybe I just never really knew her at all. The days turned into weeks, and things only got worse. Emily came and went as she pleased, and I stopped even trying to keep track of where she was or what she was doing. One night, I overheard her on the phone with Megan, talking about some guy she'd met online, laughing like she was a teenager. When I confronted her about it, She dismissed it like it was no big deal. "It's just a chat, Ryan," she said, rolling her eyes. "It's not that serious." But it felt serious to me, and it only got worse from there. I started noticing that she'd spend hours on dating apps, her face lit up by that damn screen. I tried to ignore it, but I couldn't stop the anxiety building up inside me. I had no idea who she was talking to or what they were saying, and I hated every second of it. Then one day, I saw a name flash across her screen, Dave. Just seeing that name made my blood boil. I knew it wasn't just some casual conversation. It was the beginning of something, and I wasn't ready for it. Emily, of course, was practically glowing around that time, full of this energy that made me sick because I knew it wasn't for me, and I had no idea how to react to it. I'd sit alone in our living room, staring at the walls, trying to figure out where I went wrong. Was it my fault she wanted whatever this was? Eventually, I stopped even trying to talk to her. When I came home, if she was there, I'd head straight for the bedroom or go out for a drive. There was no point in fighting about it. Every time I tried, things just seemed to get worse. That's when I started spending more time with Jake, a buddy from work. Jake's the kind of guy who lives for the moment, who believes in no regrets. I hadn't told him much about what was going on at home, but one night, after a few too many drinks at a dive bar, I unloaded everything. "Mate, screw that," he said, waving his beer around. "If she's out there living her best life, why the hell shouldn't you? You're a good guy, Ryan, but you need to stop letting her walk all over you. Come out with me. Have some fun." At first, I hesitated. Jake was always dragging me to clubs and hitting on anyone who walked by. That just wasn't my scene. But as the weeks passed and Emily kept doing her thing, making new friends and acting like we were just strangers living under the same roof, I started to feel a spark of anger, frustration, and, yeah, maybe even a little bit of revenge. It didn't take long before I let Jake drag me out to some club on the outskirts of town. The place was packed. The music was loud enough to drown out the constant noise in my head, and honestly, for once, I didn't mind. I just wanted to forget. Forget Emily, forget everything. That's when the real shift happened. The breaking point came after yet another argument. By that time, fighting had become part of the routine. I'd ask where she was going, and she'd snap back, telling me she didn't owe me an explanation. I was always walking on eggshells, and she was always looking for a way out. Our conversations were like weapons, accusations flying back and forth. And then one night, as she stormed out the door, off to who knows where, something inside me broke. I was done. I called up Ethan without even thinking twice. He could hear the frustration in my voice before I even said a word. "Man, let's go to the club," he said. "Get out of that house. Stop letting her control your thoughts. Tonight's about you, all right?" That's how I ended up, a 35-year-old married guy, walking into a club, surrounded by a sea of strangers. It felt like I was back in my college days. The music was blaring, lights flashing everywhere, and for the first time in what felt like forever, I didn't care about anything else. I wasn't thinking about Emily's rules or her strange idea of an open marriage. I just wanted to feel free, even if it was just for one night. Jake didn't waste any time. He immediately ordered us drinks and pulled me to the bar. We slammed back shots like we were 21 again. I kept drinking just to take the edge off, and soon enough, I could feel the weight lifting. For the first time in a long time, I wasn't thinking about the mess my life had become. That's when I noticed her. Hannah. She was standing near the dance floor, moving effortlessly to the music, and there was something about her. Maybe it was the way her hair fell around her shoulders, or how her laugh lit up the room. She was younger than me, probably in her late 20s, but there was an air of confidence about her that made her seem older. I don't know why I was drawn to her. Maybe it was just the escape I needed. I won't pretend I hesitated. I didn't. I wanted to forget, and she seemed like the perfect way to do that. Jake grinned and nudged me. "What are you waiting for? Go talk to her. Worst case, she tells you to get lost." So I did. I walked up to her, trying my best not to look like the middle-aged guy who had no business being there. "Hey," I said, raising my drink. "You look like you're having a much better time than I am. Mind if I join you?" She sized me up, but not in a dismissive way. It was more like she was actually interested. Then that smile again. "Why not? I could use a dance partner." Just like that, I was in. We spent the rest of the night on that dance floor, moving together like we were the only two people in the room. I hadn't felt that way in years. Not since before Emily started pulling away. Maybe not even then. Hannah was magnetic, the kind of woman who made you feel like the world stopped when you were with her. As the night went on, we kept getting closer. I could feel the tension building between us. Every time our hands brushed. Every time she leaned in to whisper in my ear. And the way she looked at me, it was clear she was interested. It felt like she saw through all the mess I'd become, and yet she still seemed to find something worth smiling about. By the time 2 a.m. rolled around, the club was winding down. Hannah turned to me, biting her lip in this playful, teasing way. "So," she said, "how about we do this again sometime? Like just the two of us. No flashing lights. No loud music. Just us." I didn't even think twice. Yeah, I'd like that. A week later, we were meeting up for drinks, then dinner, then another night out at a different spot. We flirted, laughed, danced like it was all one big game. But with Hannah, it didn't feel like a game. It felt real. For the first time in ages, I felt like I was living my own life again. No obligations, no stress, no more feeling like I was stuck in a relationship that wasn't even mine anymore. Hannah was funny, smart, and unlike Emily, she actually wanted to be there with me. She didn't make me feel like an anchor around her neck. Things escalated quickly, and I won't pretend otherwise. It felt damn good. After a few more dates and club nights, I brought her back to my place. I don't know what I was thinking. It was reckless. But in that moment, I didn't care. We were both tipsy, stumbling over each other before we even made it to the bedroom. When we finally collapsed on the bed, it was intense. Like all the anger, all the frustration I've been carrying around for so long just spilled out. It was nothing like the tension I had with Emily. No pretending, no holding back. Just raw, unfiltered connection. Afterward, we lay there, tangled up in each other, and for a moment I forgot about everything else. I forgot about Emily, about the life I was supposed to have. But then, of course, the guilt crept in. I knew what I had done was wrong. I knew Emily would lose it if she found out, but at the same time, part of me didn't care. I wanted her to know. I wanted her to feel what I'd been feeling all this time. The next morning, I woke up with Hannah beside me, her head resting on my chest, but all I could think about was Emily. It was twisted. Here I was in bed with someone else, yet I couldn't shake the thoughts of my wife. I tried to push it out of my mind, but the guilt lingered like a weight in my chest. Over the next few weeks, things started to get more complicated. Hannah and I kept seeing each other, and every time we did, I felt this mix of pleasure and shame. She didn't know I was married. I made sure to keep that part of my life hidden. As for Emily, well, she was too caught up in her own open dates to even notice what was happening right in front of her. But that guilt never left. Every time I came home after being with Hannah, I half expected Emily to confront me. I feared she would somehow find out. But at the same time, there was this strange satisfaction. It was like I was finally getting back at her, leveling the playing field after everything she'd put me through. I began to wonder if I was becoming as bad as she was. But then I'd think about all the nights she spent chatting with strangers online, all the time she'd chosen to ignore me for her adventures. I told myself, maybe, just maybe, I deserved to do this. I deserved to find my happiness, even if it came from all the wrong places. But secrets, they have a way of coming out, don't they? Deep down, I knew it was only a matter of time before everything blew up in our faces. I just wasn't prepared for when it would happen or how badly it would hurt. It was a Wednesday night when it all came crashing down. The night I realized that secrets are like ticking time bombs. You bury them as deep as you can, but eventually they explode, whether you're ready for it or not. That day, Emily had gone out again, on one of her countless dates. By then, I'd gotten used to it. She'd leave the house looking way too good for a casual dinner, and then stroll back in hours later like it was just another normal evening. I'd sit there, pretending not to care, my mind split between anger and indifference. On this particular night, I was just killing time, waiting for her to come home. Maybe I'd see Hannah again, maybe not. It all felt like a messed up game, with no real winners. I remember sitting on the couch when Emily came home that night. She walked in with a smile, a glow on her face that I hadn't seen in years. And yeah, I'll admit it twisted something inside me. She was out there with some guy, having a good time, while I was sitting there alone, feeling like a fool. My blood boiled, but I didn't say a word. I couldn't. We had this unspoken rule between us not to ask about each other's nights, to just pretend it didn't matter. "Hey," she said, tossing her purse on the table and kicking off her heels. "What are you up to?" she asked, her eyes scanning the room. "Nothing much," I replied, keeping my focus on the TV. "Just hanging out." It felt awkward as hell. I could feel her eyes on me, trying to figure out what was going on. Like she could sense something had shifted. I tried to play it cool, but inside, I was screaming. Maybe she felt it too. Maybe she knew something was off, but instead of confronting me, she just headed to the bedroom, saying she was going to freshen up or whatever excuse she came up with. I thought I had escaped for the night, but fate had other plans. The next morning, the tension was thick. We acted like everything was fine, like the facade of our open relationship was working, like we were mature enough to handle all the baggage we created. But that night, things took a turn. Hannah called, and that's when it all went south. I told Hannah to come over like I had done before, whenever Emily was out. But this time my luck ran out. I thought Emily had plans. Another evening, another night out. But she came home early, way earlier than expected. Hannah and I were in the middle of it. We didn't hear Emily pull into the driveway, didn't hear the front door open. And then, bam, there she was standing in the doorway to our bedroom, staring at us like we'd just committed some unforgivable crime. Nobody moved. Time seemed to freeze. All you could hear was the frantic, panicked sound of our breathing. And then, Emily's face twisted. Anger, disgust, betrayal. All of it was flooding her expression in an instant. Are you kidding me?" she screamed, her voice cracking in a way I'd never heard before. "In our bed, with her? You're cheating on me, Ryan." I scrambled out of bed, grabbing anything I could to cover myself, my heart racing so fast I thought it might explode. Hannah just sat there, frozen, wide-eyed, unsure what to do or say. "It's not what you think," I yelled, even as I knew how stupid those words sounded. "You wanted this, Emily. You wanted to see other people, remember? This is how you interpret that?" She shot back, tears streaming down her face, her voice trembling with fury. "You bring some woman into our house, into our bed, and then blame me for it? Don't you dare call her that." I snapped, finally finding my voice. "You've been out on dates, doing whatever you want, and I'm supposed to sit here and just take it? You're the one who wanted an open relationship. You made the rules." That's when she really lost it. She grabbed whatever she could find, a lamp, a glass, anything, and started throwing it at me, each item hitting me with the force of her rage. "You don't get it, Ryan," she screamed. "I wanted something to fix us, not destroy everything. You destroyed us." I roared back. "No, you destroyed us. All your talk about needing excitement, about feeling alive, this is what it led to. You pushed me away. Emily, you wanted me to be okay with you doing whatever you wanted, and now you want to play the victim?" Her face contorted into a pained, almost broken expression. For a split second, I almost felt sorry for her. But then, just as quickly, she lunged at me, shoving me hard in the chest. "How dare you?" she hissed, her voice venomous. "You betrayed me. I can't even look at you right now." With that, she turned and stormed out, her sobs echoing down the hallway as she ran out of the house, slamming the door behind her. There I stood, half-dressed, Hannah staring at me like I was a stranger. My world was spinning out of control. I muttered something, an apology, an excuse, and Hannah hurriedly dressed, bolting out of there like her life depended on it. And then I was alone. That's when it really hit me. Everything was falling apart, and there was no going back. I sat down on the edge of the bed, my head in my hands, feeling the crushing weight of it all. I had done it. My anger, my need for revenge had ruined whatever was left of our marriage. And as much as I wanted to blame Emily, deep down, I knew I was just as guilty. Hours passed, and I didn't move. I just sat there, replaying the fight over and over in my head. The things we yelled at each other, echoing like some twisted chant. I couldn't sleep. I couldn't think. I felt this mix of anger, regret, and something else, something that felt a lot like shame. The next day, Emily came back. Not to talk, not to fight, but to pack her things. We didn't say a word to each other. She just packed in silence, her face empty, hollow. like she was on autopilot. I tried to stop her. I wanted to say something, anything that might make things right. But the look she gave me stopped me cold. A look that said everything was over. She grabbed her suitcase, paused at the door, and turned back one last time. "I don't know who you are anymore, Ryan," she said, her voice drained of all emotion, empty and hollow. "But I know I can't be with you. Not like this. Not after everything." And just like that, she was gone. I stood there, staring at the closed door, my mind trying to process what had just happened. The silence that followed was suffocating, like a thick fog that filled the entire house. It was deafening, and in that moment, all I could think was, this is it. It's really over. The final argument. The final nail in the coffin of a marriage that had been hanging by a thread for far too long. I never imagined it would end this way. No shouting, no tears, just me standing half-dressed in a room that still carried the scent of Hannah's perfume. But that's the thing about revenge, right? It feels good in the heat of the moment, but afterward, all you're left with is the mess. The wreckage. You're standing there, wondering if it was ever worth it. If you've ever been through a real breakup, one that tears everything apart, you know what I mean? Not the kind of we had a fight, let's cool off thing, but the kind that leaves you gutted. That silence afterward is worse than any fight. It's like being trapped in a vacuum, surrounded by the weight of everything you should have said, everything you should have done. And that's where Emily and I were after that explosion. She left for a few days. I didn't ask where she went. Honestly, I didn't care. I just stayed at home, replaying every moment of that last fight like a broken record in my head. Every insult, every accusation. I kept thinking there had to be some way to fix this. Maybe she'd come home, and we could sit down, have a calm conversation, and figure out where we'd gone wrong. But as the days passed, I knew that was a pipe dream. Eventually, she came back, but not to reconcile. She came back to talk. She walked in like a stranger, her eyes cold, her voice flat and detached. We sat across from each other at the dining table, the same place where we'd shared 1,000 meals, but now it felt like an entire ocean separated us. "Ryan," she started, finally breaking the silence. "We need to talk about what happens next." I barely whispered. "Yeah, I know." There was no shouting, no tears, just an overwhelming sense of finality that hung between us like a weight neither of us could shake off. She told me she still wanted to explore open relationships, that she needed to find herself and live her truth. And I sat there numb. I had heard all of it before, but now I was too exhausted to argue. To her, this was some kind of spiritual journey, but to me, it just felt like an excuse to walk away and pretend it was all for personal growth. "So, divorce then?" I finally asked, the word hanging in the air like a lead balloon. "That's what you want?" I couldn't stop myself from asking. She looked up at me, and for a brief moment, I thought I saw a flicker of doubt in her eyes. But then she nodded. "Yeah," she said softly. "I think it's for the best. We can't keep doing this, Ryan." It was like a punch to the gut, but in a strange way, it was a relief. At least now, it was out in the open. We didn't have to pretend anymore. We agreed to meet in a few days to talk about logistics, finances, assets, all the messy details of splitting up a life. But the moment she left, I felt the walls of the house close in on me. It was like everything was falling apart all at once. The silence that followed her departure was crushing. I was sitting at that same table, staring at the empty space where my marriage used to be. Then came the friends, the part I'd been dreading. I knew Emily would spin her version of the story to Megan, her best friend who had always been her biggest supporter. I had never really gotten along with Megan. She'd always whispered in Emily's ear about how she deserved better, how she should live her life freely and without regret. So, once the word divorce came out, Megan was right there, supporting Emily with open arms. I didn't care at first, but then I heard from a mutual friend that Emily had been talking to Megan about how excited she was to finally live for her truth and dive headfirst into open relationships. Megan was all for it, telling Emily it was about time she found happiness. That stung more than I expected, like a knife twisting in an already open wound. I tried to stay away from all that. The rumors, the whispers, the sides people were taking without knowing half the story. It felt like high school drama, only with lawyers and property at stake. Meanwhile, Megan invited Emily on some weekend getaway, to clear her mind, which I knew was just code for convincing her that this was all empowering, that leaving me was some kind of self-discovery journey instead of the disaster it truly was. Then came the divorce proceedings. You think it's going to be simple, a quick, painless Band-Aid rip. But no, it's more like peeling off your own skin layer by layer. We sat through endless meetings, hashing out the details of who gets what. It was a circus of legal jargon, half-hearted apologies, and cold decisions. Every item, every dollar, every piece of our life together had to be divided. It was brutal. "You can keep the car," she said, flipping through papers like we were divvying up groceries. "And I'll take the apartment. It's closer to my work anyway." I wanted to fight back, but my heart wasn't in it. Every time we talked about dividing our stuff, it felt like I was hammering the final nail into the coffin of our relationship. Emily wanted her independence, her freedom. She wanted to feel like she was breaking free from the life that she thought was holding her back. And I just needed it to end. The arguments didn't stop just because we were going through the motions. It seemed like there was always something new to fight about. Some piece of furniture, some account, some random triviality that neither of us cared about, but somehow became the hill we chose to die on in the war that had become our marriage. One time, we actually had a screaming match over a cheap coffee maker, something that probably cost less than what we spent on takeout that week. But it wasn't about the coffee maker. It was everything else. The things we couldn't say to each other. The unspoken hurt that we both carried but never shared. In those moments, I didn't just feel like I was losing a wife. I felt like I was losing a part of myself. The anger, the betrayal, it all consumed me. It was suffocating. It felt like I was drowning, but the worst part was I didn't know how to stop sinking. So, I did what I could to keep my head above water. I started focusing on myself. Then Jake, always the one to push me, dragged me to the gym one day, insisting I needed to sweat out the pain. At first, I hated it. The weights felt heavy, the treadmill was a torture device, and every second of it felt like punishment. But over time, something clicked. Every set, every drop of sweat started to feel like a release. Like I was burning away the bitterness that had taken root in me. I threw myself into anything that could distract me. Photography became my outlet. I grabbed my camera and just started shooting, trying to get out of my own head. And slowly, I started feeling something that resembled peace. Maybe there was life beyond this mess. Maybe I could breathe again. As for Emily, she threw herself into dating. I heard it through mutual friends, saw it on social media. She was meeting new people, going out, acting like she was living the life she'd always dreamed of. At first, it made me sick. Watching her out there, living it up, while I was sitting in an empty apartment, was like a punch to the gut. It felt like she'd erased everything we'd been through. But as the weeks passed, that anger turned into indifference. And soon enough, I realized that maybe that's all we were now. Two people living separate lives, each chasing something the other couldn't offer. Part of me wanted to hate her for it, but the other part, the tired part, just wanted to move on. The divorce dragged on, feeling like it was taking forever, but eventually the papers were signed. Just like that, our marriage was officially over. The last years we spent together, everything we'd built, boiled down to signatures on a piece of paper. When it was finally done, I sat in my empty apartment, surrounded by boxes of things I hadn't packed. And for the first time in a long time, I felt something relief. Not happiness, not joy, just relief. The weight had been lifted. It was over. And whatever came next, it had to be better than this. After the dust settled, there was an emptiness that I didn't expect. It was like walking through the ruins of something you thought would last forever. You think the finality would make it easier. That once the divorce is signed, that's the end of the story. But it wasn't that simple. It's not a clean break. It's more like digging through the wreckage, trying to find who you are when everything you knew about yourself is gone. I try not to think about Emily much, but she was always there, lurking in the back of my mind. Social media didn't help. I'd see her out with new people, on hikes at bars, attending art shows, living this free lifestyle she'd been chasing. And for a while, it seemed like she was happy. At least, that's what she wanted the world to believe. But sometimes, when I saw her smile in those photos or caught a glimpse of her eyes, I thought I saw something else. A flicker of doubt. a shadow behind her happiness. Maybe I was reading too much into it, but it felt like she was just as good at pretending as I had been. Watching her move on like I was nothing more than a chapter she'd closed was painful. It stung more than I'd like to admit. She started dating more seriously. At first, she dove into the world of open relationships, going out with a string of different people, one after the other, like she was making up for lost time. I suppose for a while, it seemed to make her happy. The excitement of new people, the feeling of being free. But I guess freedom isn't all it's cracked up to be. I heard through the grapevine that Emily was struggling to find something real. All these new people she was meeting were exciting in the moment, but none of them lasted. She was looking for something deeper, something meaningful, but it wasn't in the quick flings or the casual hookups she'd been diving into. Funny how things work, right? The same person who tore apart everything we built to chase some thrill was now realizing she missed the one thing she abandoned: connection. Not the kind of connection that comes with a night out or a fling, but the kind that takes time, effort, maybe even a little bit of stability. I guess it shouldn't have shocked me when she called one night. I almost didn't answer. Her name lighting up my phone felt like a punch in the chest, but curiosity won out. "Hey," she said, her voice quieter than I expected. "I know this is strange. I just wanted to check in, see how you're doing." I was caught off guard. I didn't know what to say. "Yeah," I muttered, still trying to process that we were actually talking again. "I'm better, I guess." There was a long pause, like we were both unsure of what to say, and then she started talking about how she'd been trying to embrace this new life, trying to make sense of everything, but how it wasn't turning out the way she'd hoped. She didn't say it, but I could hear it in her voice. She was struggling. She missed the familiar, the comfort. She missed us. And then she said something that caught me off guard. "Sometimes I wonder if I made a mistake." Hearing those words hit me harder than I expected. I thought I was past it, but it cracked through my defenses, even if just for a moment. I didn't let myself get pulled in, though. I knew better. "Well," I said, keeping my voice even, "that's something only you can figure out. We made our choices. Now we live with them." There was another sigh on her end. For a second, I thought I heard the faintest hint of tears in her voice. Yeah, I guess you're right." And that was it. She didn't call again, and I didn't reach out either. I wasn't about to let myself fall back into that mess. But still, that phone call, it felt like some kind of turning point, even if neither of us wanted to admit it. As for me, I started to rebuild, slowly but surely. After Jake introduced me to the gym, I dove into it. Fitness became my new focus, something to lose myself in. I tackled challenges I never thought I'd try before. Rock climbing, swimming, running. It wasn't just about getting in shape, though. It was about reclaiming control, taking all the anger, the frustration, and turning it into something I could manage, something I could work through. I threw myself into traveling, too. Nothing extravagant, just short trips, places I hadn't seen before. Hiking up mountains, camping under the stars, learning to be okay with my own company. There was something about standing on top of a mountain, overlooking a sea of trees, that made everything feel a little less overwhelming. Like all the pain and betrayal, all the heartache with Emily was just a small blip in the grand scheme of things. Then there was Hannah. Yeah, we reconnected. It was strange at first. I ran into her at a coffee shop one morning. She knew about the divorce, of course. Word gets around. But she wasn't sure how to approach me, whether I'd still be angry or resentful. Honestly, I didn't feel any of that. I didn't hate her. Not even close. We sat down, had coffee, and talked. Really talked. She apologized for everything. For how things went down between us. For getting pulled into the fallout of my marriage. And I apologized too. For using her to get back at Emily. For dragging her into my mess. But as we talked, something clicked. I realized I liked being around her. Not just as some distraction, but because I actually enjoyed her company. I wanted to know her. The real her. Not just someone to fill the void. We took things slow. Really slow. No rushing into anything. No wild nights or reckless decisions. We got to know each other in a way we hadn't before. And it felt good. Real. For the first time in ages, I felt like I was building something new. Something healthy. Not just trying to outrun my past. Of course, there were moments when the past tried to creep in. Moments when I'd see Emily's face in my mind, or remember the good times we had before everything fell apart. And yeah, it still hurt, but it didn't break me. Not anymore. Maybe that's what moving on is: accepting the pain, making it part of your story, but choosing to live beyond it. Choosing to build a life that's yours. One that's not defined by someone else's mistakes or your own failures. Emily and I, we both went through hell. We dragged each other down and burned through everything we had. But we made it out. Bruised, scarred, but standing. And maybe that's enough. For me, it was the chance to start over. To find something better, something real. I hope Emily finds what she's searching for. Maybe one day, she'll realize that happiness doesn't come from chasing every thrill, but from knowing who you are and what you really need. As for Hannah, we're taking it one day at a time. No expectations, no pressure, just seeing where it goes. And for once, that feels like enough.